woman stands in a beautiful apartment, getting ready to go out. The space is warm and polished, neutral tones, a luxury candle burning. Her makeup is clean. Her jewelry is minimal but intentional. She puts on gold earrings, picks up a designer-looking bag, sprays perfume, and checks herself in the mirror. Everything about the scene looks expensive. Then her phone lights up. Not a romantic text, not a work win. A credit card notification. Minimum payment due. Another tab, rent. Another tab, student loan. Another tab, payment failed. She locks the phone quickly and goes back to fixing her hair. She looks like she has her life together, and in a way she does. She knows how to look composed, how to look chosen, how to look like she belongs in rooms that cost money. What nobody sees is that her finances are being held together by timing, image, and denial. Now cut to another woman. Her clothes are simpler. She is clean, calm, almost forgettable. She leaves brunch early, she drives an older car, she says no to one trip. Nothing about her is trying to signal success, but she has 6 months of expenses saved. Her investing is automatic. She has no revolving card debt. She does not panic around payday. 2 women, 2 very different forms of security, but only one of them looks rich. So here's the question. Why does the woman who looks richer often have less financial power? And when did looking secure become more important than actually being secure? Because this is where the conflict begins. One woman buys relief. Another woman builds relief. One woman spends to create the feeling of ease. The other creates ease slowly, quietly, underneath the surface. From the outside, the first woman often looks more successful, and that is the trap. For the first time in history, financial strength and the appearance of financial strength can look almost identical for a while. A luxury look can be rented. A lifestyle can be financed. Calm can be faked. Margin cannot. And this is where women get trapped, not because they are foolish, not because they are shallow, but because image gives an immediate social reward. It gets noticed, it gets praised, it gets mirrored back quickly. Real wealth often gives nothing visible at first. No applause, no instant proof, no visible sign that the sacrifice is working. So the issue is not that women want beautiful things. The issue is what happens when beauty becomes proof, when spending becomes identity, when being perceived as financially okay replaces becoming financially free. Here's the part most people never say out loud. Looking rich is not just a style choice. For many women, it becomes a psychological strategy, a way to manage how life feels, a way to soften the pressure of not being where you thought you would be, a way to stay socially accepted while your reality is still catching up, a way to protect your identity when your finances are not yet stable, because financial pressure does not always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as presentation. You do not feel broke, you feel exposed, and instead of fixing the exposure, you learn how to cover it. You learn how to look like the version of yourself that already made it. You learn how to move like you are secure, even when you are still negotiating everything behind the scenes. And this is where the pattern deepens, because the image starts doing something very dangerous. It starts giving you emotional relief. People treat you differently. They assume you are doing well. They include you in certain spaces. They respond to you with a kind of ease, and without realizing it, your brain starts connecting appearance to safety. So you maintain it, even when it costs you, even when it delays you, even when it quietly weakens you, because losing the image feels like losing your position, and that is the hidden game. The real competition is not always income, it is perception. A woman can be comparing her real financial life to someone else's curated highlights, and that creates a pressure that logic alone cannot fix. Because now it is not just about money. It is about identity. It is about feeling like you are not behind, like you are not the only one still figuring things out, like you are not the one being left out of a life everyone else seems to be living. So the spending continues. Not randomly, not carelessly, but emotionally, quietly, consistently. And the most dangerous part is this. It works for a while. It gives you just enough validation to keep going. Just enough comfort to avoid confronting the deeper issue. Just enough normalcy to delay real change. But underneath it, something is building. Between how stable your life looks and how stable it actually is. And the longer that gap exists, the more expensive it becomes to close. Because now you are not just building wealth. You are also maintaining an illusion. And illusions are costly. They demand consistency. They demand upkeep. They demand that you keep showing up as a version of yourself your finances have not fully caught up to yet. So instead of your money strengthening your future, it gets redirected to protect your image. And that is how a woman can look like she is moving forward, while quietly standing still. Looking rich is dangerous because it can delay the moment a woman faces the truth of her financial position. That is what makes this pattern expensive. Not just financially expensive, psychologically expensive, because once a woman gets used to looking fine, it becomes easier to postpone asking whether she actually is, and that delay becomes a hidden tax. It normalizes a high monthly burn. It makes expensive habits feel standard. It makes overextending feel like maintenance instead of a warning sign. It makes saying no feel bigger than a financial decision. Now it feels like social failure, like falling behind, like being the only one not keeping up, like your life is shrinking while everyone else's life is expanding. And that is how the trap sustains itself. Because a woman can be living exactly the way she believes success should look, while quietly weakening the structure that would make her secure. That is the hidden tax. It is not just the money leaving. It is the pressure to keep the image alive every month. It is the cost of maintaining a version of yourself that requires constant funding. It is the way debt hides the truth longer than poverty does. Because poverty is visible, debt often is not. Debt is dangerous partly because it is quiet. It lets you keep performing normal. It lets you stay stylish, social, and smiling while your future gets sold a little at a time. And for many people, this is not a short phase. Nearly half of credit card users carry a balance. Most of them carry it for more than a year. Some of them no longer believe they will ever fully clear it. Which means debt is not always a mistake. Sometimes it becomes a system, a quiet extension of a lifestyle that costs more than it looks like it does, and because the outside still appears fine, the urgency gets delayed. Nothing looks broken enough. You can still go out, still dress well, still show up, still look like your life is moving. So the truth keeps getting pushed back. Saving gets postponed, investing gets postponed, building real margin gets postponed, because right now, your money is busy funding the costume of arrival. And this is where it becomes even more dangerous. Looking rich can trick a woman into thinking she is behind if she lives below her means. It can make discipline feel embarrassing. It can make restraint feel like regression. It can make a wise woman feel poor simply because she is not performing abundance in a visible way. So instead of building quietly, she starts compensating publicly. And that compensation cost her future. Not all at once. Just little by little, a dinner here, a payment there, a trip she felt she should not miss, a purchase she justified as a reward when what she really needed was space. And over time, the real loss is not just the money. It is the delay. The years lost before she builds real margin. The years lost before she starts investing. The years lost before she realizes she was never behind because she lived simply. She was behind because she kept financing proof. That is the hidden tax of looking rich. It charges a woman twice, first in money, then in time. So let's name what is really happening here, because once something has a name, it becomes harder for it to control you. I call this the 3 layers of false wealth. And once you see these 3 layers clearly, you start understanding why so many women can look financially powerful long before they actually are. The first layer is visible wealth. This is the part people can see: the clothes, the trips, the bags, the beauty, the dining, the aesthetics, the softness, the polish. Visible wealth is powerful because it communicates quickly. It tells the world she is doing well. She has taste. She has access. She is moving up. She belongs in beautiful spaces. And none of that is bad on its own. The problem is that visible wealth is the easiest layer to copy. It is the fastest layer to perform. You do not need deep financial stability to create the look of ease. You only need enough money, enough access, enough credit, and enough emotional reason to keep the image alive. That is why this layer is so convincing. It satisfies the eye before it satisfies reality. The second layer is supported wealth. This is the layer most people never see. This is what keeps the image standing. Credit cards, buy now, pay later, paycheck timing, delayed bills, help from others, emotional overspending, loose boundaries, flexible standards, money that is already spoken for before it arrives. Supported wealth is what makes a lifestyle look stronger than it really is. It gives the feeling of wealth without the structure of wealth. Everything appears handled. Everything appears normal. Everything appears covered. But underneath, the life is being supported by pressure, and that pressure always sends the bill later. That is why this layer is so dangerous, because a woman can live here long enough to mistake support for strength. She can start calling it normal because it has become familiar. She can forget how much of her peace depends on everything going right next month. The third layer is real wealth. This is the quietest layer, and that is exactly why people underestimate it. Real wealth is what protects a woman's life. Cash reserves, Low fixed expenses, retirement contributions, ownership, investments, optionality, time freedom, the ability to leave, the ability to rest, the ability to say no without her whole life shaking. Real wealth is not designed to impress people first. It is designed to protect you first. And that is the difference. A woman is not financially strong because she looks expensive. She is financially strong because life becomes less able to corner her. That is the real test. Not whether her lifestyle photographs well, not whether people assume she is doing well, not whether she looks polished from the outside. The real question is how much pressure life can apply before her peace disappears. Because false wealth can survive admiration. Real wealth survives interruption. False wealth can survive compliments. Real wealth survives emergencies. False wealth can survive appearances. Real wealth survives reality. And once a woman understands these 3 layers, she starts seeing the truth more clearly. Many people are not living in real wealth. They are living in visible wealth, supported by pressure. And pressure always collects what it is owed. And this is the part that matters if we are going to tell the truth about why this pattern pulls so many women in. Women do not get pulled into false wealth in a vacuum. This is not just about bad habits. It is not just about weak discipline. And it is definitely not just about vanity. There is a deeper psychology underneath it. Many women were not just taught to be attractive. They were taught to be presentable proof. Proof that life is working. Proof that they made good choices. Proof that they are not struggling. Proof that they are still desirable, still respectable, still on track. And that kind of conditioning runs deep. It teaches a woman that how her life looks is not just personal. It is social evidence. It affects how she is treated, how she is judged, how she is valued, how quickly people assume she is doing well. So of course image starts to matter. Not because she is shallow, because she has learned directly and indirectly that presentation can change outcomes. In social spaces, looking put together can affect whether you are admired or overlooked. In romantic spaces, it can affect whether you are pursued or discounted. In professional spaces, it can affect whether you are read as polished, capable, established. So sometimes the spending is not about greed. Sometimes it is about not wanting to be treated like the woman who is failing. That is why this goes deeper than money. For some women, looking put together does not feel optional. It feels protective. It feels like keeping yourself from slipping into a category the world punishes. The woman who looks behind. The woman who looks unstable. The woman people quietly stop respecting. So she spends, not always to impress. Sometimes to stay safe inside the gaze of other people. Sometimes to protect the version of herself that still feels worthy. And that is why simple money advice often misses the point. Because it talks to the behavior without touching the fear underneath it. It says spend less, but it does not ask what the spending is doing emotionally, what identity it is holding together, what judgment it is trying to prevent, what discomfort it is helping her avoid. And then culture makes it even harder, because women are constantly being sold the idea that confidence can be purchased, that self-worth can be styled, that reinvention lives inside a cart, a checkout page, a better brand, a more elevated lifestyle. So when the culture tells women that confidence can be bought, it becomes very easy to confuse consumption with self-respect. And once that happens, cutting back feels like shrinking. It no longer feels like a wise adjustment. It feels like becoming less powerful, less beautiful, less desirable, less impressive, less enough. That is the emotional trap, because now spending is no longer just spending. It is self-maintenance. It is identity maintenance. It is emotional stabilization through appearance. And that is why 2 women can spend money in completely different ways, even if the amount looks similar on the surface. One woman uses money to decorate her identity. Another woman uses money to defend her future. They may spend the same amount this month, but 10 years from now their lives will not look the same, because decorated identity gives immediate reward. Defended future gives delayed reward. Decorated identity gets noticed now. Defended future gets felt later. Decorated identity can make a woman look elevated. Defended future makes a woman harder to break. And that is the difference. Most people miss it. Is not always about how much a woman spends. It is about what role the money is playing in her life. Is it being used to create proof for other people? Or is it being used to create protection for herself? Because those are not the same thing, and one of them gets louder results now. The other gets stronger results later. And this is where the numbers make the emotional story harder to ignore. Because a lot of financial damage does not feel dramatic while it is happening. It feels small, manageable, almost harmless. Woman A spends an extra $500 a month maintaining the look of having made it. A more polished routine, better dinners, more lifestyle support, more money spent making her life feel aligned with the image she wants to hold. That is $6,000 a year. And $6,000 is not just $6,000. It is the emergency fund that keeps panic out of your chest. It is the investment habit that compounds. It is the freedom fund. It is the leave if you need to money. It is the difference between reacting to life and having room inside it. Because the truth is, the money is never only the money. It is what the money could have become if it had been given a different job. The cost of looking rich is not just what leaves your account this month. It is what never gets the chance to grow. It is what never gets invested. It is what never gets turned into protection. It is what never gets turned into peace. And this is why small monthly leakage matters more than people think. Not because every woman needs to obsess over every dollar, but because repeated image spending creates a future where the appearance of progress keeps replacing actual progress. And when enough of those months stack up, the life starts looking stronger than it really is. That is not always called being broke. Sometimes it is something quieter: financial fragility. The Federal Reserve's 2024 Well-Being Report found that only 51% of adults said they spent less than their income in the month before the survey. 63% said they would cover a hypothetical $400 emergency expense using cash or its equivalent, and only 35% of non-retirees said their retirement savings were on track. That means a lot of people are not broke in the dramatic sense. They are just financially fragile. And fragility with good styling is one of the easiest conditions to hide, because financial fragility still allows brunch. It still allows outfits. It still allows a curated life. It still allows enough normalcy to avoid the full emotional impact of what is missing underneath. Until something interrupts the performance: an emergency, a layoff, a health issue, a breakup, a rent increase, a season where money does not stretch the way it used to. And suddenly the woman who looked fine realizes she was never standing on strength. She was standing on timing. That is why the numbers matter, because they reveal something the mirror cannot. A woman can look elevated and still be one interruption away from fear. A woman can look polished and still have no real margin. A woman can look like she has arrived and still be financing an image her future cannot sustain. That is what the monthly $500 is really exposing. Not just spending priority, not just taste, structure, not just lifestyle protection. Because every dollar is always becoming something. The question is whether it is becoming proof for other people or power for you. And this is the point where the conversation stops being about other people and starts becoming uncomfortably personal. Because once the pattern has been named, it becomes harder not to see yourself inside it. Have you ever bought something because you wanted to feel like your life was moving? Have you ever overspent before an event because you did not want to look like the only woman who was not keeping up? Have you ever told yourself you deserved it, when what you really needed was relief? Have you ever confused being admired with being secure? Because this is why the trap is powerful. It does not feel like self-destruction. It feels like self-preservation. It feels like helping yourself hold it together. It feels like protecting your dignity. It feels like giving yourself one more reason to believe your life is working. And that is why so many women stay in the pattern longer than they realize. Because the spending is not always coming from arrogance. Sometimes it is coming from ache. Sometimes it is coming from pressure. Sometimes it is coming from the quiet fear of being seen as the woman who is not doing well. And when a woman has not yet built financial power, image can temporarily protect her from the shame of not having. It can buy her a little social ease, a little confidence, a little distance from the truth she is not yet ready to fully face. It can make her feel less behind, less exposed, less vulnerable. But temporary protection becomes a permanent pattern if it is never named. And once that pattern settles in, it starts rewriting what feels normal. Now overspending feels earned. Now restraint feels embarrassing. Now simplicity feels like evidence that something is wrong. Now peace gets postponed because appearance keeps getting funded first. That is why this is deeper than money habits. This is about emotional substitution, using image to stand in for security, using admiration to stand in for stability, using visible progress to soothe the pain of invisible lack. And the painful part is that it can work just enough to keep the cycle alive. Just enough compliments. Just enough validation. Just enough normalcy. Just enough social proof to stop you from asking the harder question. Not, do I look like I'm doing well? But, if life applied pressure right now, how much of me would still feel safe? So this is the reframe. Not stop buying nice things. Not reject beauty. Not become smaller. Not punish yourself for wanting softness, elegance, quality, or pleasure. That is not the point. The point is to stop using nice things as evidence, because that is where the distortion begins. The moment a woman starts treating beautiful things as proof that she is secure, proof that she is progressing, proof that she is powerful. She gives those things a job they were never meant to carry. And that is why the relationship becomes dangerous. Not because the things are bad, because the meaning becomes too heavy. Rich is not what gets attention, rich is what reduces fear. Rich is what lowers desperation. Rich is what gives a woman options. Rich is what lets her say no without collapsing her life. That is what real wealth does. It quiets urgency. It reduces panic. It creates breathing room. Gives a woman the ability to make decisions from clarity instead of pressure. And that is why this shift matters. Because a woman can keep the beauty, she can keep the taste, she can keep the softness. But she must stop asking those things to prove that her life is strong. Strength has different evidence. Strength looks like reserves. Strength looks like low panic. Strength looks like not being forced into yes. Strength looks like not needing applause to trust your direction. Strength looks like being able to absorb interruption without becoming undone. So if we tell the truth, the contrast is this. Looking rich says, I can be seen. Being rich says, I can withstand. Looking rich says, approve me. Being rich says, I can protect myself. Looking rich says, I have taste. Being rich says, I have margin. Looking rich says, I arrived. Being rich says, I am not easy to trap. And that last line matters more than most women realize, because the opposite of wealth is not always poverty. Sometimes the opposite of wealth is vulnerability. Being cornered, being forced, being unable to leave, being unable to rest, being unable to say no because your lifestyle requires too much maintenance. That is why the healthier identity is not a woman who looks less beautiful. It is a woman who is no longer using beauty to carry the weight of security. It is a woman who enjoys nice things, but does not confuse them with power. It is a woman who understands that wealth is not about producing an impression. It is about reducing exposure. It is about becoming less available for chaos to control. That is the real shift. From performance to protection. From proof to power. From being admired for the image to being supported by the structure. Maybe the deepest financial shift a woman can make is this. She stops asking, do I look like I'm doing well? And starts asking, what in my life is actually making me stronger? Because a woman can look expensive and still be cornered. She can look polished and still be one emergency away from fear. She can look successful and still be financially exhausted. And that is the part many women feel, even when they do not have language for it. The tiredness, the pressure, the quiet instability underneath a life that still looks beautiful from the outside. And maybe that is why this matters so much. Because the wealthy woman is not the woman who performs prosperity best. She is the woman who no longer needs the performance. She is the woman building a life that does not depend on appearance to feel valid. She is the woman who chooses peace over proof, margin over mimicry, assets over applause, freedom over flex. She understands that being seen as successful and being safe inside your life are not the same thing. She understands that a polished life can still hide panic. She understands that applause does not pay for peace. And when she sees that clearly, something shifts. She stops spending to escape the feeling of being behind. She stops decorating instability and calling it progress. She stops asking her image to do what only structure can do, and she begins quietly to build a life that can hold her. A life with room, a life with choices, a life that does not shake every time something unexpected happens, because the goal was never to look rich. The goal was to become untouchable by chaos. A wealthy woman is not a beautiful illusion, she is a well-built reality.